It is 6:01, Monday, May 17th. The Rutland Select Board declare this meeting open. At this point in the meeting, I will entertain a motion to waive the reading of the remote Zoom instructions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Benoit?
Benoit, aye.
Whiteman?
Whiteman, aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Nichols, aye.
And Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Is Becky on?
No.
No.
Not on as of yet, no.
Okay, so we'll just keep an eye out for her, and then when she comes in, we'll take that item out of order. All right. First on the agenda, we have minutes, treasury warrant, payroll. I'll entertain a motion to approve treasury
So
warrant 21-W23 and payroll 21-PW23.
So moved.
Whiteman seconds.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, questions? Okay, hearing none. I'll have a roll call vote. Benoit?
Benoit, aye.
Whiteman?
Whiteman, aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Nichols, aye, excluding any COA wages.
And Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. We have a set of meeting minutes from the 3rd of May, the 7th of May, the 12th of May, and the 13th of May. I believe one of these sets we can't approve tonight because it is a public works board, and that board is not open, even though we serve in that function.
Rich, if I may, you guys can still approve the select board portion of the 13th, we just can't address the Board of Public Works.
All right, so when we go to approve the 13th, just I want to make note in the motion, whoever makes the motion, that we are only approving the minutes for the select board portion of the meeting.
So I'll move that whole that motion. You know how to write it. Tamika?
All right, I'm taking that as that we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the 3rd, 7th, 12th, and 13th, excluding Board of Public Works minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Benoit?
Benoit abstain.
Whiteman?
Whiteman, aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Nichols, aye.
And Resity, aye. Motion carries, 4 yeas, 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay, we are here, and the next agenda item is public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment or weigh in on any issue? If you are, please raise your hand in the Zoom feature any time in the meeting, and we'll try to accommodate you and let you in. We know a lot of folks aren't overly familiar with how to do that, so type up and Peter will let us know that somebody's here. Anybody on your list, Peter, that we can't see on the screen? All right, nobody here for public comment. Okay, petitions, applications, awards, and presentations. We have first a open public hearing regarding Eastview Farm and Spotted Cow Cafe's application for a common vic license. We do have to open the hearing, so I will declare the hearing as open. Is there anyone here to comment on that particular item? I see Justin and Richard. Maybe it's something if you want to just give us a quick rundown of the project. We can go from there.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Justin Brigham. Dick Schultz is sitting right next to me here. First of all, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just say I appreciate all the help we've gotten from the town so far. This is kind of especially for me, this is a new process. So the help that we've gotten through the town hall, through the Board of Health, and through the Selectman's office has been terrific. I've been very patient with us. We've had a few stumbles across along the way, but we appreciate all the help and all the patience. So this project is kind of, I know there's been some confusion just because we've kind of renamed the farm, and with that name comes kind of two different sounding entities in terms of Eastview Farm and then the cafe as well. That really, I think, initially was just to kind of cover our bases right out of the gate. But the cafe side of it still has some work to do, and we're not really ready yet for that for that phase, I guess, maybe if that's the way, if that's a good way to put it. So for the moment, we're really focused on the farm itself and the farm store, getting the store open. And the other part too has been some ice cream, the ice cream window itself, being able to serve ice cream. Those right now are the focus. The store would, you know, provide items such as milk, dairy products, eggs, meats. We are trying to stick with a local theme. Most of what we have, we're trying to produce ourselves, or we're trying to stick with local agriculture, just to kind of help support some of the local farms around, some of the local businesses. That's kind of been the theme of what we're trying to do. Outside of that, I think we're trying to kind of stick with like a traditional farm type store. And even up to and including the ice cream, that's a local makers of ice cream. So we're trying to get away from some of the bigger names and stick to some of the local dairies around that are making their own ice cream. Anything else? Nothing. For the most part, Mr. Chair, that's kind of sums up, I guess, more or less what we've been doing or what we're trying to do. And again, the town hall has been great. Both Beth and Laura, I gotta say Laura, have been terrific. Very, very, very helpful and patient. We've again, this is a new process for me, so kind of just getting my feet wet on it. They've been great, very, very helpful. The inspectors that have been out, the building inspector and Board of Health have been terrific, very, very helpful. So I really appreciate that.
Great. Does anybody from the board or the public have any comments? It's obviously up to, this is a hearing, so it's up to Dick and Justin if they want to field questions, but I'll leave that to their discretion. Any board members?
I had a quick question. I thought I saw something here about beer and wine, like a liquor license. Is that part of the project? I thought I had seen that.
That definitely is something that we're trying or we're looking to into the future. Again, that's not something right now we've kind of, without trying to reinvent the wheel, we've spoken with some other people that have been successful in obtaining their license, and we've talked to them, and you know, it's something that definitely in the future we would like to do. But again, really the focus at this point has just been the store and the ice cream. You know, we're especially with growing season coming, you know, we'd like to be able to sell our own vegetables and you know, meats and whatnot. So great question. I think especially out of the gate, we threw a whole bunch of stuff out because that's kind of like some of the end goals. But right now, just to kind of get our feet wet and get started, it's primarily just the store and the ice cream window.
So do we have something that's more concise? I mean, we have a lot of information here that specifically talks about just the ice cream and vegetables. Is that?
I think, Ron, well, I do want to say that I know Ron and his staff have been very involved, as well as the building inspector and Board of Health, in helping this business compile all the paperwork. And I guess Ron can speak to that, just as a follow-up question to add on the Linsons, to make sure that...
It's just for the common vicular licenses, that's what they're going
Right.
for right now.
Okay.
We actually learned a great deal in dealing with them on that issue, that the store actually didn't need the common vic license. Common vic license is required if you actually serve food on premises, if people eat on premises. So you had to get some clarity on that. We worked with both Dick and Justin. We went through all of the various departments to get their sign-offs, and we got their insurance paperwork here. Their future plans, as you say, if they do go for a liquor permit, that's gonna be different, and it'll come to the board and everything else. But for tonight's purposes, we're strictly focusing on the common vic portion, which is really on the restaurant side more than the store side.
But, and just one other follow-up. So I think on Seth's sign-off, it said no kitchen. Is that correct?
Right. We actually took a tour out there myself a couple of times, and I went out with the building inspector. There's a restaurant component that's kind of up front with windows to serve ice cream on the outside, but there's a kitchen in the back that's not done yet. That kitchen is not part of the common vic license.
Okay.
And later on, it's gonna have to be checked out by the building inspectors everywhere. That, we made them board off that section so that nobody could go back there. So that's all closed off according to the building inspector.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just, I guess, for those of you watching at home, the thousands of people that are, I guess that was a joke. We do have a pretty comprehensive list, too, of the items that they're gonna be selling in the store. It's all local, or locally to this area, which is good to see. spoken to a lot of people that are pretty excited about the project. I mean, obviously, when you have projects like this with something like the Milk Room and some of the other farms are doing, it's kind of exciting to see this kind of project take shape. So, yeah, I do want to thank you for putting all this stuff together. And I guess my last question to Ron is just to make sure before we have a motion to sign, well, we have to close the hearing first, but all of the conditions of this have been satisfied by what's been
My
provided.
understanding, the last thing we were waiting on was the insurance documentation, which I see is in the file.
Okay,
So I think we're all set. I just want to thank them because I got that, they've been great to work with, and as we ask them to do things, they've been doing whatever we need them to do. So it's been a good effort between the town and the business in this case. And it really looks to be someplace I think the citizens of the town are really going to enjoy once it's open.
great.
Mr. Chair, there is a hand up.
There is a hand. Karen and Tim. Karen and Tim.
Hey, this is through the chair. I just had a question about the common vic license that is going to be issued. Again, it was mentioned by Ron that the kitchen's been boarded off on that. So, because this is being issued as the cafe and the Eastview Farm, what has to be done to go back and get the cafe open? I mean, if you issue a common vicar's license to the above application, I'm confused on how you go back and unissue or reissue a second commerce vicar's license for a cafe.
It's my understanding that right now what we're talking about is the common vic with a cafe will allow the serving of ice cream in the exterior window, which doesn't require use of the kitchen, and some other various things that are listed here. It's my understanding, in having kind of helped understand this process and kind of walk through it with you, Ron, that once the kitchen met certain requirements as outlined by the Board of Health and the fire chief, that could be added to this project. I don't believe they would have to go through a separate licensing procedure.
Right, yeah, I agree. I don't think it needs a separate license. It would fall under the license for the business. The inspections, the things that have to be done for the back part of the kitchen is the building inspector, the health department, all are gonna have to be verified. But the common vic is for the entire restaurant establishment itself, but it can't be utilized until it meets all those other conditions.
So, to Mr. Chair, then I guess my concern is that I have no problem with a common vic selling, but shouldn't there be a finding put in there that per the MGL code that you've got to lay out, how the restaurant's going to be and such like that, and you're given basically a temporary vic license until it's finalized? Shouldn't that be somewhere in this final common vicar's license that you're issuing? Because it seems to me you're issuing a license and things aren't done. This is no different than approving a deck that's not finished for, I don't see the follow-up procedure. That's what I'm struggling with right now.
So, through you, Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Tim, so the requirement is that he can't open it without the building inspector's approval. So he's gotta meet those final requirements. If he tried to open up the kitchen, it would be immediately closed down because it hasn't met the other requirements. So, once he meets the other requirements, the common vic is already issued. But what's gonna keep him from doing anything with the kitchen is not the common vic issue, it's gonna be the building inspection, and he has to meet the fire code. All that's gonna keep him from opening.
Okay, I just typically like to have my I's dotted and T's crossed on official licenses. So the MGL said that they typically, if things aren't completed, it should be issued as a proposed or conditional type of license. So that was the only thing I was asking.
No, I appreciate it. Just to be clear though, all those department heads, the building officials, the health officials, they've all signed off on it. So they're all very aware of it, and there'll be a close eye on it to make sure it follows all the requirements before they're allowed to open.
All right, again, I wish everybody success in business in Rutland. I just want to make sure everybody dots the i's and crosses the t's.
Yeah,
Thank you.
This process, Tim, and I hope you appreciate too, with some of the businesses starting in town, we have had businesses open in phases, and we've tried our best to accommodate and work with those businesses. It sounds like the kitchen's been boarded off. There's no access to it. The common vic at this juncture is only for ice cream. I personally, I'm not sure where that falls, but it seems like an entirely separate space that would need to be re-inspected, but we have all the paperwork with the application.
Okay, good enough. That's it. Thanks.
Somebody else from the board want to weigh in? All right. Tamika, I want it reflected in the minutes that Ron indicated that it was pleasant to work with Dick Schultz.
Document.
You got it.
That's a joke, Dick.
But I want some ice cream if I put it in there.
Absolutely, all right, perfect. All right, if there's no further questions from the public or the board, I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
Well, I need a motion first.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Benoit,
Benoit, aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
Clark,
Clock eye.
Nichols,
Nichols eye?
and the city aye. Motion carries unanimous. It's to sign and award this. I'll entertain a motion if the board so chooses.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? And I just want to make sure that I'm asking you, Ron, Tim's concerns. We believe we're doing this appropriately, and that's all situated correctly, and that we can kind of move forward. When they
All
want to-
indications from all departments and everything that this is all set, so yes, I believe it's done correctly. And I'm not the least bit concerned about the kitchen opening without the inspections, because that's gotta be done, so.
Okay.
Yeah, through the
I
chair.
know.
I guess my comfort level is it's all through here. It does say like.
Oh, there's a
Seth
ton of
didn't-
paperwork.
Yeah, so Seth didn't sign off on it. There's a memo that says not the kitchen. So there's a lot of stuff in here that restricts them, so.
Okay.
And you know through the chair that if he does open the kitchen, somebody's gonna slam him one anyway. So, let's be real. He tread lightly or he will be in trouble.
Well, that is a big deal. People don't like that, so. All right, so we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, I'll have a roll call vote. Benoit,
Benoit, aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
Clark,
Clock eye.
Nichols,
Nichols eye?
and the city aye. Motion carries unanimous. Guys, congratulations and good luck, and let us know if you need anything further.
Taste testers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Good chair. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.
I
Okay, is Becky on yet? She is not.
don't see, I'm surprised.
She's in Florida.
I know, but she wanted to get on early so we can
Oh.
take her out of order.
She's on Florida time.
All right. So we've had item 5 taken care of. We do have, there's nothing under department head updates, but Ron, did you want to
Yeah,
update
a
us?
couple of things I want to talk about quickly. First, an update on the COVID. We currently only have 4 people in quarantine, so we've come a long way. I'm very proud of this. We have vaccinated over 50,000 people in our area. That says
That's
a lot
amazing.
about the
Yeah.
town of Rutland and the work they've done, not just for the town, but for the whole area. They're currently seeing a slowdown in the signups and getting cancellations due to vaccines becoming closer locally to people. Because there's only more vaccines instead of coming an hour away
Yeah.
to come here, they're not coming here anymore. So that's good news that they can get vaccines closer to home. Rutland's is 70% first dose vaccinated and 55% second dose from ages 0 to 100. So that's really good. We are now, as you can see today, we're vaccinating 12-year-olds and up, and it's kind of interesting to see all the young people out there today that are getting vaccinated. So that's good news. The current plan is to end the clinic on June 24th. Although it's interesting because their understanding is that ages 5 and up may be approved to receive the vaccine by August. So I don't know how they're gonna deal, if they're gonna open up the clinic for that or what the situation is from 5 to 12, but that's something they'll work on depending upon how it all comes out. That report was directly from the health department. As you guys are all aware, the school system came out last minute and changed their assessment, which I think everyone recognizes through our budget to CAS and town meeting to CAS and the override question to CAS. So that late minute change was very difficult. There was no way the finance committee could adapt with the kind of speed. And it happened on a Thursday night. We had town meeting scheduled for Saturday. I appreciate all the work that went in by the moderator, the finance committee, and everybody, the select board to change the dates and to notify people as quickly as we did. All avenues, every possible way we can notify people through numerous reverse 911 calls, sign changes, emails, social media. We attacked all areas, and I think we did pretty well in advising people of the cancellation to change the date. People should be aware that the new town meeting date is scheduled for June 5th. The moderators decided to keep it still at the high school. He did have some concerns and we thought a great deal about changing it, but given that COVID is still going on, we felt that we needed the space and that the high school was still the best site at this time.
Ron,
I-
if I may, that communication
notification be sent to the schools, because updates from the schools are still saying it's June 12th.
Okay, we'll get them out. I don't know why, because the June 12th date wasn't available for the schools, so that's one of the reasons we picked the June 5th date.
Yeah, I know Randy already booked it with the school.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that would be an issue, because it was the schools that set that date for us in some ways, but I'll double check with Liam, find out why that is.
Thank you.
As you know, one of the things that happened is the school committee essentially voted another close to $200,000 reduction in their assessment. Since then, I've worked and made changes I sent to you all to add back the staff that we lost in our budget. And I want to say that that's really good. We're in a much better position than we were before, but still we have a couple $100,000 of significant cuts that are facing the town that we're going to be talking about later tonight and when we talk about the override. But I'm proud to say that I recommended that certain things be added back, and the finance committee did a great job in supporting that request, and I think they felt the exact same way I did, that our first responsibility was to try to get our staff back, and that was really critical.
Yeah.
Finance committee voted and adopted, I think, pretty much a final budget. That budget is now before the town accountant just to shape it for purposes of setting it up on the motions document and before town meeting. I know that our chair of the finance committee, I believe, was working with I asked the town accountant to call her to shape it to the way she was comfortable in that presentation. So I think that's good. I sent out today motions, the updated motions document with all the updated school numbers. There are a few items that we still have to adjust, but the motions document is in pretty good shape, reviewed by legal. And I think we have some minor adjustments, but we're pretty much ready to bring that to town meeting as well. A ton of work has been done by all my department heads. I actually, after we got the school reduction, I called all the department heads who had staff involved and asked them, what do you want back? And every one of them to a T said staff, so that's why the staff all came back. So I'm really proud of the work that the department heads did and the finance committee did. And we're moving forward, but difficult choices still have to be made. People shouldn't think that, because the election's over and the override question went down, it really didn't end the problem. And I want to once again make it very clear, the Board of Selectmen, previous to the election, voted and recommended to the citizens of the town to vote down the override as a result of what the school committee did. So I thank the Board of Selectmen for clearly making that decision so that people had a good understanding of what they should do on the ballot question when it came up. And that is all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I do want to make a comment too, because we've worked through this budget issue. There's been really intense meetings. I mean, Carol, I saw your name on all of them too, because I know you were campaigning, so I know that you're familiar with the process. I know Karen's on the call, Karen and Tim. I really want to attribute, I think, the coordinated effort between you and Peter and Carol in some of the communities in trying to get clarification, the effort on behalf of us as a Board of Selectmen, and particularly the work that the FinCom has done. I really think that was responsible for some of that reduction in that budget to make the budgets a little bit more palatable to the town. So I think that everybody involved, including your department heads, really have to be applauded for those efforts, because everybody worked really, really hard. So if you can please pass on our thanks on behalf of us.
I will, and it's very appreciated, because as you know, this caused a lot of stress, particularly staff reductions.
Yep.
Caused a lot of staff and morale issues among my staff. So it's really nice to be able to go back and tell people who were potentially worried about being laid off that it's our intention to keep them now, and that was a huge issue. So I thank the Board of Selectmen for their support in this as well.
And Karen, if you're there listening, please pass along our gratitude to your board as well. Certainly earned. So okay. Next up, we have discussion regarding the TA review. This is something that we had discussed our last meeting. I had sent out the information, I'll be a little bit late today, to board members regarding the review document. That is not what's included in the packet. What's included in the packet is kind of Ron's rundown of what he's been working on for the last several months. The review document that was sent out per our discussion 2 weeks ago is the same document that we had used as a standard form from Mike Nicholson when he was here. I'm not sure about what was used for Margaret prior to that. But if there are any suggested changes or questions, I guess now would be the time to bring it up. Ron, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at it. If it's something you're comfortable with.
So to you, Mr. Chairman, I did not have much time to look at it.
Yep.
Pretty busy today.
Yep.
I decided to update kind of the review document I gave you last time, because you could see the kinds of things I've been working on, so everybody has an understanding. I'll say it, and truthfully, it doesn't make a big difference to me either way. As I said at the last meeting, that my understanding was when we did the contract originally, that we were gonna have the big end of the year evaluation based on the goals and objectives that we both agreed to. In the first 3 meetings, were gonna be more informal discussions about what was going on and stuff. I just looked and saw the document was huge today. It's a pretty lengthy document. So I haven't had the time to evaluate how that relates to me and what we set up for goals and objectives and stuff. But, you know, truthfully, I'll say it again, I'm comfortable with the Board of Selectmen that they'll give me a fair evaluation. I don't know if the tool is good or bad, to be honest with you.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Leah?
I just wanted to reiterate, I mean, I was familiar with that document from going through the process with Tia Nicholson. And I think it's a great document. I think we need to be mindful that this is obviously a 6-7 month
Oh, yeah.
review.
Yeah.
Similar to what we did with the 3 months. There were obviously some things that hadn't gotten there yet, and that's fine, just because of where we are in the review cycle. So I just wanted to reiterate that for everyone. And I also wanted to ask if we could make sure to include Mr. Stillings' feedback if he has any, since he had the longest working relationship. I mean, Carol's hasn't been working with Ron specifically for the past
Yes.
6 months.
Yes. I believe Jeff was on. If Jeff wasn't on that email, I'll make sure he gets a copy. Jeff, it wasn't intentional. I'll certainly forward that along. And you'll have a chance to weigh in on that too and be invited back for the discussion. I think we understand. I know that this has come up before. Select Board Member Nichols has brought up the review because when we had initially talked about it, we wanted to have intermittent, those informal reviews and then a 6-month and then go move to an annual. To be honest, the document that we provided that we used for Mike, it's my understanding we had not been in the regular process of reviewing, and I think that's come up several times with other areas and department heads, and we need to get more uniform in that. And to Leah's point, the last 6-7 months, all of us have just been putting out fires and dealing with kind of the situations we were handled. So it wasn't really, we didn't have a goal setting type meeting that we usually have. It's kind of been reactive, I think. But we still want to make sure going forward, the purpose of this in my mind is now that the world is kind of returning to a semi-normal state, to provide Ron some input as to what we would like to see. Because really, we haven't been in a place to be able to do that with everything else going on with the budget and COVID. So I view it more as a proactive tool. Okay, any further questions or comments about that process? We can set a deadline if Ron, if you want to take a look at it over the next couple of days, get it back to us maybe for the next meeting. If everyone wants to jot something down, take a look at the matrix. If there are any questions, please refer them to Ron and we'll just move ahead with it. Okay. All right, under new business, we have a discussion regarding marijuana RFI host agreement.
You got Becky on there.
Becky.
Oh, Becky's here now. Becky, are you there?
I am.
Okay, we're going to take your item
Hi.
in order because we know that you are in a much warmer and sunnier place.
Thank you.
All right. So if it's okay with the board, we're going to move item 141, which is the discussion regarding the bond anticipation note, to accommodate our treasurer's schedule and get that out of the way so she can go back and enjoy her life outside of our
Just
work.
one more day. I'll be back on Wednesday. So
Go ahead, Becky.
I just wanted to bring to your attention, we are renewing one of the notes, bond anticipation notes for the authorization for the water and sewer improvements. We had a 5-year capital plan that was authorized in November of 2019. This is renewal. The first borrowing we did was for $595,000. We did that in May of last year to start the projects, and I know Joe has been working on some of the water main replacements and a lot of the sewer I&I work. So we're moving ahead with the project. This is a renewal of that bond, the first borrowing, and adding in the 3rd year borrowing of $695,000. this bond, so then this bond is for 1.29 million. It's dated May 27th, and it's going to be due in November, which is where we borrowed the second, when we borrowed the second year bonds. So this will renew in November, and at that time, we are going to, the plan is to refinance, which we had talked about in the budget process, refinancing some of our debt that we have out there. Is going to save us quite a bit of money. So we're going to refinance that and add this $3 million borrowing into that in November. So we're going to do a permanent financing for a lot of our debt in November while the rates are low. So this is just a short-term bond to get us through until November so we can do the permanent financing. We did get 4 bids on the bond from 4 different banks. The lowest was from Greenfield Cooperative Bank, and they came in at a rate of 0.35%. So that is very low compared to where we were last year when we borrowed the 595. It was at 1.44%. So we are at a good time to refinance and everything like that. I wanted to bring it to your attention. It's not something that you, as a board, have to vote on to authorize, because it was voted at an annual town meeting to borrow the funds. But I will need you to sign off on the paperwork that will be in my office on Wednesday for the borrowing. And so we can get it out to the DOR on Thursday.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for the treasurer?
Just one. Becky, have you seen what the rates might look like in November? Do we have any idea for the permanent bond?
Well, we have, like, Unibank sends out, Unibank, who's our financial advisor, sends out a reoffering of other places that have financed for those, and they're, like, for the larger amounts. I can forward the emails to you that I get. I think I've seen them coming in about that 1.4 and that type of stuff, or based on the bond rating and that type of stuff. So we, it's looking good. But some of the things that we're refinancing are the USDA loans that are currently at like 3.5 or 4%. Of course, we'll be borrowing them. It'll be a 20-year note with this $3 million, and there's about another $3 million that we're going to refinance, and it'll bring those rates down to significantly from where they are right now with USDA.
That's good, because it'll save us money long-term in the enterprise fund. That's good.
Right, exactly. The other ones, some of the ones that we're refinancing are like the library and DPW and that type of stuff. So it's, in the long run, I think the estimated savings when we refinance is it's close to $1 million over the life of the loan over the next 20 years. So it's going to be good. Yeah.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah. So I will just need at least 3 board members to come in to the office, hopefully Wednesday, to sign. All the paperwork will be there and ready for you to sign. I just need a majority of them to sign, of the board to sign.
Great. Okay. Anything else?
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Becky. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your stay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Take care.
Okay. Back to order. Item 137, we have a discussion regarding a marijuana RFI host agreement. Ron, I think this is the new company that wanted to...
This is. We recently put out a request for information for vendors for cultivation, marijuana cultivation. We received one company, which is Mass Tree Holdings, a very good company. They already have opened a retail establishment. They put in what I thought was a really good presentation and bid. We're currently working on the host agreement. It is pretty close to done, but it's not done. But I wanted you guys to have a draft of the agreement in this current form. I'm going to be making some minor adjustments to it, but I wanted you guys to have a chance to look at it before we have the final host agreement that will come at our next board meeting. The one piece of this document that I know is definitely going to change is they've agreed to donate $5,000 to the police department, but this is our town attorney has reviewed this and added a section of other benefits that really isn't relevant to this, so I'm going to be taking that out. But as of right now, you're looking at the cultivation, you're looking at the 3% impact amount we'll be getting, and $5,000 donation. The location, I think we've talked about in the past, is on Main Street behind Blair's Plaza. I don't know what the name of that plaza is, but in the back part of that is where the cultivation is going to go.
It's like where the hardware store is?
Yeah, behind it, there's an empty warehouse kind of space. That's
On the
where
left
he's using.
side is all warehouse.
Yeah, so that's where he's gonna be putting it. This company would like to also get a license for manufacturing, which I wish they talked to me ahead of time. The concern with that is the way the original bylaw was created. It said that each license had to be on its own parcel of land. So they would like to do manufacturing and cultivation all in that one piece, but the way the bylaw is written doesn't allow for that. So we're gonna be talking about that, and I don't know, we might be considering looking at a change in the bylaw or whatever over the long term. It would seem to me this is a really good company. If we could do both out of that facility, it would be great. Otherwise, they're gonna have to build a separate facility just for the manufacturing component of it. But it is something we're gonna be talking about. I got a meeting scheduled for him, I think, on Wednesday, and we're gonna be talking more about that. But this agreement is focused on cultivation only, and that's what we'd be moving first and adopting first before we get into the manufacturing component.
And this was the only company that bid?
It's the only company that bid, and I'll say, well, that's true, and it's disappointing. It's also a very good company, so it makes me happy when you get quality people who are bidding that already have experience. And if you look at the, and I think we gave you copies of that, Summer Settlement got copies of it. You look at their history, their background, their staff, very, very experienced team with a lot of knowledge in this area, and I think that they're the right people to do it. If we're gonna do marijuana, be it retail or cultivation, I want it to be in the hands of a firm that's actually a quality firm that knows what they're doing, and I really believe that this is that kind of firm.
Okay. Anybody have any questions from the board?
So just a quick one from the chair. So this is a lease agreement, right? So no?
No, this is not a lease agreement. Well, between them and
Right,
Clay is a
right,
lease agreement, not between us, but yes.
So is the owner doing the repairs, or is it a leasehold?
The owner actually, from what I'm hearing, he may be somewhat of a partner in this. I don't know what percentage or what the deal is, but they're talking to him about some potential kind of partnership. But yeah, it starts off as a lease agreement between him and the company.
Right, I was just curious who was responsible for the actual construction, repairs, and whether it was.
I would
gonna be
imagine
leased.
right now that probably falls under the lease agreement as it is now, right?
If I may, Mitch, a little bit to that point, I was on the the community hearing for the retail, and a lot of the questions were about the physical space, which was not anything that the company could do. It was between the land or the building owner and the planning board and everything. So I think that as a select board, we're not really involved in the lease agreements between the
Right.
building and the private entities or whatever. So I think a lot of the concerns we heard on that call specifically were more kind of about the traffic
Sure.
flow and everything. That's not something
If
we or
you-
the company could do.
If you remember though quickly, Lyndon, on the retail one that you're talking about building, I think Steve is gonna build it for them.
Okay.
But that one is, from what he tells us, is based upon the one that's in Sturbridge. I drive past it every day. It's a very small building, but it's very well, nicely developed. But if you ever do wanna see it, it is based upon that Sturbridge one.
Yeah.
I think it's called, I wanna say Green Meadows or Green Gold, I'm not really sure. It's right on Main Street in Sturbridge.
Okay. And just quickly also, if it's legal, so they're doing a traffic study, right? Because that's a pretty busy area. So was that something I saw
I don't
on
think
the
it's
last one?
I think the traffic study is gonna be for more the retail side. I'm not
Right, but
sure
they are
for
doing
the
a study for
cultivation,
that.
that's an issue, right? But
All right.
for the retail, I think they are, but not cultivation, it's really not gonna be public based. It's really gonna be
Right.
them developing it and sending out to places, but there shouldn't be any customer base to that.
Okay. Thank you.
I do have a question. You mentioned that some of the language is going to come out that the lawyer put in that you don't think, what can we expect? And
So-
if it does, would we be able to see that again?
Yeah, so the part you're gonna see, right now, under state law, the town can charge essentially 3% of the gross revenues for an impact fee. These kind of companies, when they come in, they always try to offer some kind of incentive. So this one, for instance, is offering $5,000 to our police department as a donation. They're also putting incentives that they're gonna hire some percentage of their workforce and all that kind of stuff. But in some other towns, there's also some additional contributions that other towns have used. So when the attorney gave it to me, they used something they've used for other towns as well. In this case, that's not part of our deal, so it's gonna come out. It's like other community benefits is the section.
Okay.
That part was never part of the RFI, not part of anything they proposed, so it doesn't match our RFIs that's gonna come out.
Excellent,
Okay.
thank you. Thank
To
you.
answer your question, Carol, it's basically state sanctioned extortion is what it amounts to. So if you're looking for a simple definition, it boggles my mind that we have to deal with this. I mean, we just had a cafe come through and we're not asking for free ice cream for them to locate up there, but the marijuana businesses come through and you gotta give away the
It's an extra tax is what it is. It's an added
Tax.
tax.
okay.
An
Tax.
extortionate tax is
Yeah.
what it's clear, but okay.
It's like the mafia, That's what it is. You
Same
wanna
thing
do
on
business here, we
gambling.
need a new pool,
Yeah.
it's crazy. But yeah, just keep us apprised. We're not voting on anything tonight because we don't have the finished
I'll
copy.
expect it the next meeting, that's why I wanted to give you the update now, I wanted you to see the draft, so you had time to look at it. So you're not voting on it quickly next time, you should be
Yeah.
pretty aware of it.
And just to clarify too, with the retail, we had an internal team look at, like I know the police chief is involved with the security, the fire chief, that process is being followed.
Same exact thing, that's how this company was selected. So that same team you're talking about
Yep.
met, reviewed the whole request for information that they sent us, the proposal. We reviewed it all, it was all scored as we always score them, even though it was one person, we still scored them. Scored very high, and that was the company we selected.
Great. Okay. Anybody else? Nope. All right. Moving on to discussion about the 300th anniversary committee Friday concerts. In my mind, this is now kind of a moot discussion item because the state has lifted all restrictions ending at the end of May for outdoor activities. Jeff is here. I know last time when those restrictions were still in place, even a few days ago, the last meeting we had talked about him talking to the Board of Health and working through things. I know that that's something you've done, Jeff, but at this point, I think we just give the 300th committee, if the board's okay with it, the green light to move forward as planned and to get some things done if that's what they want to do. Does anybody have any comments,
No
questions?
objection whatsoever.
I'm gonna throw, since we're talking about Jeff, just for a minute, I sent you guys all a letter on the wall issue, and Jeff wrote that letter today, did a very nice job in putting that together, but I sent it to you for your review. If you have any changes, adaptations, let me know, but I thought he did a nice job, not only presenting the issues at hand, but also the history of the property and what it was for, so I wanna thank Jeff for his work on that issue, he did a nice job.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. And we don't need to vote on that again because
Nope.
we voted the last time. So if we're all happy with what Jeff was together, if you have any edits, send them to Ron. And Ron has, I think, authority based on the
Yeah,
vote to send that out.
I'm in a couple of days, so if I don't hear from anybody in a couple of days, I'm gonna send a letter.
Okay. While we're on this agenda item, I think we have to have a brief conversation because it is in the same vein about the 4th of July, just to update the board. I had talked to the chair today of the 4th of July committee. They're meeting on Wednesday. Given that the state kind of blindsided every community in Massachusetts by lifting the restrictions after most communities had already met vendor deadlines and canceled their events, we're going to be scheduling a joint meeting between the two, our board and the 4th of July. There are some vendor constraints, there are some budget constraints because of fundraising during COVID. I think the full intent is to come up with maybe additional activities or activities that will be more cost effective or we're able to do given the constraints that we face both with time, funding, and deadlines for vendors. But I did want to update the board on that, so we'll have that as an agenda item for discussion for our next meeting, which we'll have the 4th of July committee in to do, and I would encourage all of you to listen in to their meeting on Wednesday because I'm sure it's something that they're going to be talking about as well.
Interesting, just a quick question. So, the fire chief, police chief, and the board of health will all be involved in the decisions, is what's appropriate.
I talked to the Board of Health and the police chief prior to this meeting because of that item. Scott had actually called me to tell me about the new restrictions when they were talking about them initially. I haven't had a chance to talk to Seth yet, but they will be involved with the discussion. I think, again, the constraints, there's a couple of different issues. One is that if none of the other communities that have already canceled, if they don't have any activities, you're still going to have a crowd control issue in Rutland. The other issue is obviously budgetary in nature. So we'll have those discussions, but everyone will be invited at the table.
And then through the chair, I mean, maybe a suggestion where we hand out stickers to residents for parking, which may limit other people from taking all the parking. Have some kind of a system where, to assure that our residents have the opportunity to participate and that everybody from out of town isn't taking up all the spaces. And so I don't know if that's something that could be discussed.
No, absolutely. And it's my full intent to schedule that meeting soon with the 4th of July, with our public safety officials, to see what we can do. I do think it got away from us a little bit. As you know, it was a decision that was really forced on us by the state, the restrictions, and it came with the advice of our Board of Health and Fire Chief, who are working very hard during this pandemic. The lifting of these restrictions was not anticipated, and so it caught a lot of communities by surprise. It's good, but I don't think it was anyone's intent on this board to want to cancel events this summer. So I'm glad to see that those were lifted, and maybe we can salvage some of that activity for later in the year. Any questions? Jeff, anything?
I do. Can I have a minute?
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind words about the Mass DCR letter. Happy to help. Ron did reach out to me because we had also penned the similar phased letter for the Historical Commission, so I was happy to help that with that. If you need anything else, feel free to ask. On that note, I was contacted by Senator Goby, who informed me that she had placed, the day after your hearing, a budget amendment seeking no less than $50,000 for the preservation of the prison camp ruins and the prison camps and historical preservation in there. So it's got to go to committee and all that, but I thought that was worthy to bring up to you as an update the day after your hearing. Senator Goby acted on her promise, so I thought that was nice. If I could speak real briefly of the tricentennial plans for August.
Yes.
Okay, so we've been meeting almost every 2 weeks, and so Jeff Stillings, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Tricentennial Committee, Lord Lane. We've been meeting every 2 weeks, and one of our focuses right now, our primary focus, is to try to get some seed money and start to build up a bank account so that next year, which is going to come sooner than later, because our establishment day is June 18th, and it's going to be a big weekend. We really need to start bankrolling some comfort funds so that we're able to do some of the great events, and that gives a limited window when you're talking about nice weather. So we have this fall, and then you have the spring, and the winter's always kind of a no-go in there, and we didn't want to overlap with the 4th of July festivities. So that's how August came up, and then now, like you said, Mitch, with the state lifting the requirements, boy, that really helps us a little bit. So what we wanted to propose permission, and as you concurred, that we thank you for that, is the use of the common. But with that, a couple of essentials that we kind of need to go with that. We would like to do bands, some local talent bands and/or karaoke. We would need electricity access either through the annex or the community hall or through that electrical box there in the upper common in there. So we would need access to the town electricity for that. We'd also like to host food trucks for those evenings, and whatever permits would be required to have those food trucks. We would like the permit fees as T.A. Nicholson did with the Food Truck Festival. I think he charged $50 a truck to park on Memorial Field. We would ask that those proceeds specifically go to your Tricentennial Committee, because that's the whole idea. And also would like you to entertain the option of having a pouring license and probably subcontract that through one of the local vendors like the Milk Room or Seven Saws to do a pouring tent, a beer tent for those evenings on Friday nights. And I would respectfully ask the fee get waived. So we are looking for a nod to go forward before we exert any resources to ask for talent, to ask for food truck vendors, to ask to try to negotiate pouring establishments, etc. So that's in addition to the use of the common. We'd like to at least have your blessing before I start making calls. And I'd be happy to give you regular updates on how this is going. The plan is there's 4 Fridays in this August. Inclement weather could be the next day, Saturday, but it would be for those 4. And if it works out, we can go through the fall and make a nice community event and get some seed money in. We were able to have a successful raffle at the townwide and at the 5K. So we have just under $1,500 for some of these startups, and the biggest expense, of course, would be porta potties. Can't have an event on the common and a band without some sort of a porta potty. So those would have to be rented, and then maybe if we had to pay a little bit for the band. So that's what we're working on. I'm happy to give you regular updates. But I'd at least like a verbal nod that we can go ahead and start booking some of these ideas.
I think Ron wants to chime in, but I'm going to say I want to approve the electric on the condition that we get to hear Mr. Stillings sing karaoke, if that's something that's going to happen.
Oh, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to. We want people to come. So.
All right, Ron, go ahead.
So I don't have any problem with most of what you said. The Board of Selectmen, if they're okay with the way, taking the fee and, for the food trucks and giving them to the Tricentennial Committee, I'm fine with that. That's up to the Board of Selectmen if they want to do that. Jeff, my only concern is it going to require a private duty police officer? Because that's the one issue. I think you need to meet with the police chief and find out what the requirements are for private duty.
So if we did, okay, that's fine. We're looking at 4-hour venues. Detail rate in town is $51 an hour. That's $200. That's where some of the seed money would go to. So that would be one of the expenses, a detail officer, and certainly the porta potties in there. I still think it would be profitable if we would have the pouring license, the beer tent. That's where we're going to get the money from. And if you did $50 for a couple of food trucks.
A couple of questions, Jeff, and maybe this is something you have to bring back to the committee, and then I see Skip has his hand up too. I know that I had a conversation with Seth, and he brought up that we might continue the tradition of the food truck festival this year, and this is before we knew the new guidelines, so it looks like that is a possibility to have that festival that we started doing every year 2 years back. My concern with food trucks is always, I want to make sure, because we do have local restaurants in town, that they also have the opportunity to participate, so it's not taking business away from them. In particular, right in that area, you got Center Tree. Those guys have worked real hard to build that business, and I want to make sure that they're somehow involved and able to participate as well. So we're not having folks come from out of town, take our money and bring it back to their community versus keeping it here.
I'd be happy to, through the chair, I'd be happy to meet with the Center Tree. I mean, they would, I think they're in the catbird seat right across the street from the Common, especially being a bar establishment in there. They would have that access to the people coming and going. They could certainly have their own little kiosk type tent for whatever they wanted to sell. I think that number of people could only help them, especially for a Friday night if we're only talking 4 hours.
I just want to be mindful of, we do have a lot of restaurants in town that have worked really hard during the pandemic, and just make sure that they're approached about opportunity would be my only concern with that.
I could do that. I can reach out and I'd be happy to brief back to the board. I did speak to the number one pouring contender, which would be the Milk Room, and they were all in. And in fact, he offered to help set up a tent for us in there, so the competition there wouldn't be a problem.
Great.
But certainly the Center Tree, I think they would benefit from it.
Yep. And Skip, you had a question.
So the select board really doesn't have any rights to give up the permit fees because we don't issue them. They go by the Board of Health.
Right.
So before we give up anything, the Board of Health's got to be talked to.
Do you know what permits Mike Nicholson was referring to when he did the last food truck festival?
I have no idea.
I think that those permits run differently, Jeff. But I guess if you're looking for like the conceptual go-ahead, I think we're all in agreement that we want to support whatever you do.
Yeah.
It's just the logistics of some of the minor details. You're going to have to come back, and we're going to have to work that out through Ron.
Jeff, yeah, talk to me, and we'll figure out those logistics and figure it out. Okay.
Okay, because if it's going to be a loss, then it's not. I mean, next year is going to be the loss. We're going to be trying to make money and put on the events.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it'll be a big deal. We just got to connect with the right people. Just keep in mind that whoever your alcohol person is gonna have to apply for the one-day liquor permit, whoever it is. Whatever organization or business it is has to apply for that, so, you know,
Right.
they still gotta go through the normal process, okay? And then the last thing is, you know, I know we created, it's not directly for this, but just so the board knows, we set up a link to the treasurer's office, so if citizens wanna make donations to either the 4th of July Committee or Tricentennial Committee, they can do it online now. So their contributions can be directed right online for any of these organizations, so I think that's a good thing, to be able to start advertising the fact that they can do it online and people can make those donations.
Yeah, that's great.
That doesn't mean we've gotten any, but I know they've been working with Becky to set up a PayPal or some sort of a digital type donation.
It's all set up, Jeff, so it's ready to go.
Oh, nice job. All right, thank you for that.
Any further questions, comments from the board? Oh, well, Jeff, just keep us apprised and let us know how else we can support, but I think the general consensus is just keep moving forward and we'll help any way we can.
Okay, will do. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
All right. Next, we have a vote to accept the resignation of a anniversary committee member. It is Jackie McGravy. She filed the resignation. I know this came up before. It was a couple weeks ago, May 6th. So I'll entertain a motion to, with regrets, accept the resignation of Jackie McGravy and thank her for her service.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Benoit,
Benoit, aye?
Whitman,
Whitman, I with regrets and appreciation.
Clark,
Clock eye.
Nichols,
Nichols eye with regrets.
and Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. We had next on the agenda is the vote to approve the DPW director contract as presented.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is a 3-year contract. As you know, we had an existing 3-year contract with the DPW director that ran through June 30th. As of this contract goes into effect beginning July 1st. It is very, very much like the existing contract. The changes to this contract are a flat 2% increase each year over the 3 years, which is kind of the going practice all across the state, pretty much the same thing that all of our unions got. The DPW director did not ask for extravagant stuff, so made it very easy to negotiate this contract. He did add a little bit of money for professional development. As you know, recently he became a certified procurement officer, which lends a lot of value to the state, or to the town, to do procurement, particularly the road construction and building kind of construction stuff. That now he should have more experience than I do in that area, and that really makes a good asset for the town. So we got a little bit more money for professional development and $250 clothing allowance. As you know, DPW is an area where you go through a lot of clothes. All the union members have a clothing allowance. The DPW asked for the $250 just to be able to buy boots and things that he needs for work. But other than that, it's pretty much the same contract we had. Now, these contracts are a little bit unique for people like the treasurer and the DPW director. While they are in fact 3-year contracts, the town has to vote to approve the appropriation each year for these type of contracts. For instance, my contract, once you vote to 3-year, you have to follow the full 3 years appropriation on this contract, the treasurer's office and a few others. Every year, if the town for some reason voted down the appropriation at town meeting, so this contract, that's automatically accepted and ends the contract. So that is good for, you know.
That's happened in abutting communities.
That's the distinction between these type of contracts and contracts like mine and the police chiefs.
Yep.
It has that distinction, but I think it's a good contract. I think it's very reasonable. It keeps him in a position where he doesn't fall backwards behind his own guys, because the guys are coming up with the union contract, getting increases. You don't want your DPW making less money than the union guys who work for him, so I would recommend this contract that the board approve it.
So, through the chair, if it's only good for, if we gotta redo this every year, or approve it every, no, you said approve it every year, so why don't we just go to a year-to-year contract?
So, to that question, you don't have to vote for it every year. It's just that funding has to be approved at town meeting every year for the contract. So, as far as the Board of Selectmen is concerned, it's a 3-year contract. The only difference is at town meeting, if for any reason the money was stripped, the contract, we would not be required to pay him for future years. But the contract, once you do it, it is a 3-year contract.
Okay.
And through the chair, just a
Sure.
point, Jeff's name is still on the contract, so they'll know enough to change it.
Yeah, we could change it and have Carol sign it, that's no problem.
Well,
Well, actually,
Carol
Carol
can't
shouldn't
sign
sign
it.
it because she's not gonna be involved, so three, as long as the three other members sign it, we're good to go.
Okay, so we just, yeah, take.
Yep.
Okay, if the board so moves, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we sign the contract for a 3-year contract for Joseph Buckley, DPW director. Do I need anything more specific than that?
I don't think so.
Whitman seconds, do we need to add the dates starting June 1st, 2021 through July 1st?
July
Well, it says
1st.
elective July 1st and
Yeah,
through June 30th.
Yeah.
The contract is dated that way, so it's set.
I know, I just didn't know if we needed it for the minutes or anything.
Oh, for the minutes.
Yeah.
I don't think so. We could, we'll note that. Tamika, you want to note it?
Got it.
All right, motion and second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Have a roll call vote. Benoit,
Benoit abstain?
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Nichols,
Nichols, aye?
and City aye. Motion carries unanimous. Congrats, Mr. Buckley. I know you're on the call. You are a joy to work around. So,
I just want to say thank you.
all right. The last item on the agenda is a discussion regarding a word that I'm getting tired of seeing, an override.
Commissioner, just move this a little bit so you can hear me. As everyone in town is aware, there was a question on the ballot for an override of $500,000. As a result of the school committee changing their assessment and reducing it by $200,000, that $500,000 number became frankly useless or not really what the town needed. I had asked the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen easily agreed to vote to recommend against people voting for that override. I think that was a very wise move by the Board of Selectmen. But the question remains that there's still $300,000 that we have to deal with. $200,000 of cuts that are significant, things like police overtime, fire overtime, DPW, snow and ice, a whole bunch of important issues that unless we move to an override, they're gonna have reductions, significant reductions from their last year's budget numbers, which means that we won't be able to provide the kind of quality services that the people of town have become used to. In fact, services will go down significantly in a number of important areas. The Finance Committee has been looking at this, and I know that one of their members is in the process of rewriting the impact statements that we had put out. And that's gonna be worked on so that people at town meeting could understand what the impact of this budget's going to be. The town accountant is redrafting the final budget documents and working with the Finance Committee chair to show those cuts and how they're gonna be done. Now, in my mind, and Karen's on the phone, she can correct me if she thinks I'm wrong, but in the original process, you remember I asked for $400,000. We decided that $500,000 would be the better number to use. Now we can do two things. We can do a $300,000 override, which in my understanding would make up for the additional $200,000 of cuts, and it would keep us from using, let's say, $100,000 of free cash to balance the budget. That would be the $300,000 override. So it would effectively mean that as we start next year's budget, we would be completely financing the whole budget on long-term revenues and not one-time revenues. Or we can make a decision to put the override question for $200,000 and continue to use $100,000 or so in free cash to balance the budget. So, you know, to me, one of the problems we're having this year is that we've been using free cash to balance the budget. Now, I want to say that
There is a third option,
well, okay.
and that's just to make the cuts.
Or to make the cuts, right. So to the degree I'm talking about, towns use free cash to balance budgets. Small amounts that they can, you know, be comfortable that it's not gonna cause them future problems. It is not unheard of to use small amounts of free cash to balance a budget. It's pretty common among a lot of towns. But it's also not the greatest fiscal policy because you're using one-time revenues to balance a budget. So that's not a great policy. I think I told you that based upon the $500,000, and again, I'm speaking off the top of my head, I think the override would have cost an additional $130,000 for the average house, which was 320,000-ish. So if we cut that down to 300 or 200, it's gonna cut that amount of impact. And again, that's over and above your normal tax increase. It's an additional sum of money. But let's say if we went to the $300,000, it might cost the average citizen, I don't know, $80 or $90. If we went to $200,000 less than that. So as you said, Mr. Chairman, the third option is just to take the cuts and let the towns, go backwards in terms of the budget, which means there'll be less overtime, less money for books and things at the library, the whole host of things, less part-time firemen, a variety of cuts to things like supplies and things that you need. We can do that, but it will put the town in a position where we're going backwards, not even staying consistent with this year's services. Those are all decisions that the Board of Selectmen get to make. It's up to you. As you know, I'm still recommending, I guess, that the $300,000 and not using free cash is the best decision. I'm not against $200,000 and $100,000 in free cash. Not the end of the world. If that makes it easier to pass the override, so be it. Because I think, at least keeping town services to where they are now is critical. And $100,000 is a lot better than $400,000 where we were last year. So I'm not totally against using a little bit of free cash. The third option of cuts, I guess that depends upon the people of town, how they feel about less services. Yeah, you pay a little less in taxes, but you receive less in services. That's the trade-off, and I think that's a question people will vote out when they vote on the override question, if they want that or not. That's the whole basis of the discussion of an override and letting people be involved in that decision. Now, truthfully, I reworked the letter that I sent you guys back when we did the override. I just reworked it today to kind of give you at least the basis for it. The issue here, I think, is going to be timing, because you have to have it 35 days prior to the ballot at the election. So we don't have a lot of time to make this decision. I'm not necessarily asking the board to make that decision tonight, but if we are going to go forward with this, we're probably going to need a special meeting within a week, because we're going to need that for the timing. The election would have to be sometime after June 22nd when the schools close, so we can use the facilities for the election, and before July 1st when the budget actually starts. So I think, Peter, you were saying the 28th
Right.
is this
So
Monday?
If I may, the town clerk and I have had discussions about this. She would prefer to keep the election on the same day of the week as our normal election. That makes it a of our usual local election, and that makes it a Monday night. Monday day. The only Monday that the school's not open is, Paul? Yeah, thank you. The only
This
Monday,
meeting brought to you by T-Mobile.
Exactly. The only Monday after school is closed is the 28th of June. Sorry, yes, 28th of June. And so, I mean, I hate to speak for Anita, but since she's not here, I'll do my best to represent her position of that being her wish for the best day. 35 days before the 28th is a week from today, which means that if you're going to have an election, it's got to be settled. If you're going to have an election on the 28th, which is within this fiscal year, before the start of the next fiscal year, it's all got to be decided in the next 7 days.
Yeah.
Through the chair. I'd just like to comment that I'm not a big supporter of overrides by any means, so I don't support them. But if we do an override, I think it needs to be tied to the schools, because they're the ones that are exceeding the 2.5. So I think the language needs to be part of the school budget and not tied into any general override. So in the article it should say for Bay Path and Wachusett, an override for such and such an amount. And I think if it's anything over 2.5%, I think it's justifiable that the override be placed on the schools.
So if I could through you, Mr. Chairman. So you're correct, that the override right now is written for the three groups. It's for the Massachusetts School District, the Regional School District, for Bay Path, and for Town Municipal Services. So it's written where all the town is together in the override question, with the thought that, this is a full town budget, any way you look at it. It affects all different departments. So that's why it's written the way it is, and hoping to get all parties to support the override question. The question you referred to, or what makes it more complicated, is in order for the school number to be changed, it's gonna require two towns to vote no still, to be able to take that to reject the school budget, right? We don't know if the two of the towns will vote to do that, especially in light of the fact that the numbers are a little bit lower, so it makes it a little harder to reject, right? Because the numbers are a little bit lower.
But I guess my point is that I don't want to trick them into doing it. We're doing it because of the schools, and if it doesn't, either way, it all washes out the same at the end of the day. Because if the override doesn't pass, it's still the cuts are going to have to come out of our departments. That has never changed, and historically we've tied it to the school budget because that's where the biggest deficit has been historically. So I think it's important that it be tied to the schools, because we didn't support when we voted on the amendment, we weren't supporting the school budget as it was, and I don't know, as a board we'll have to rediscuss whether we're going to support it going forward. But I think it's important that it specifically be tied to the reason that there's a deficit, and that is the schools going over the 2.5%.
So, it's an interesting question. So it is tied to the schools, but it's also tied to the town. As you just said, that if there are cuts, it always falls back on the town side, right? So the reason you include the town side is because you want people who support the town side of government to vote for the override, because in fact, who's going to get crushed if the override fails is the town side of government.
Right. I think we've been educated enough to know that.
Well, that's what the
We've burned
question
several
was.
times, but it's the schools. And if the override doesn't pass, then the school budget doesn't pass. So if any other town doesn't pass the school budget and the override doesn't pass, then that's two towns, and it doesn't pass. So I think it's important to be tied to the school budget.
So
Because like I said, that's the reason that we're doing it.
Well, so is it, I guess I'm, to understand, so you're saying the question should only include the school district in Wachusett and not the town, is that what you're thinking?
Exactly.
Okay.
And then so that even if it passes at town, it depends on whether the people are gonna vote that they wanna pay extra taxes to support the schools. And like I say, I think most residents are aware that if it doesn't happen and we're forced into it, the only place that money's gonna come from is our departments. Cause that's happened every year for many, many years, so.
We completely agree on the basis, I guess we just look at the question differently. I like adding the municipal to the question because I think it gets municipal departments to support it, and people who support the police and fire, we're gonna take the cuts to vote for it. That's why I did that.
Just a little history, we
Yeah.
did an override for departments.
Yeah.
And the school sucked that money right out, so that did absolutely nothing for our departments. Because we ended up having to pay the school anyway.
So,
We're just playing with numbers. The reason that we're in this situation is the school is going over the 2.5. The departments can't.
Right.
So it should be directed at the reason that it's being overridden.
so in fact, just to be clear about the numbers, the increase, even with the reduction for the school system, is $446,960, which is still a 3.39% increase.
Mhm.
Now, their argument to us is gonna be, well, the student number in Rutland hasn't gone down by as much as other parts of the district, that's why we're getting a bigger percentage. That would be their overriding argument. So, and truthfully, I think there's some truth to that, how much I don't know. And I would say this to you, given my recommendation, again, the Board of Selectmen has to decide, I still think we should encourage people to vote down the school budget. One is because you're right, it's still over the 3%, right? But two is because the explanation of how they're gonna fund this difference is by using one-time revenues, a lot of that to actually fund the budget, which just puts us into a bigger problem next year, if that's how they fund the money that they're losing, right? So I think that's a bigger problem as well. In terms of, I think you're correct in terms of the issue of the schools because of the large increases are responsible, right? But I think this is not a one-year problem, it's a multi-year problem, right?
Right, well, this is
Because-
what that carryover was from last year.
Right, and
That
that
was
carryover
the
last year, people have
deficit
to
again
understand,
from last year.
it's a school carryover,
This
in my
is-
opinion, last year,
exactly.
because the schools asked for a big increase last year.
I want to disagree a little bit. Yes, the school budget is always much higher than the 2.5%.
Mhm.
So it is a contributing factor. I also think this is from years of mismanagement, and I don't say that in a malicious way. I just know that we've been using one-time revenue to balance the budget at the same time we've been hiring and onboarding and building capacity. It's kind of like, taking a second mortgage out on the house when you don't have a job. At some point, you're going to have to pay the money. My fear is you put an override in front of your constituents, a lot of which contacted me during the last period and were not happy about the proposition of an override. That would have failed catastrophically whether or not the board took a position on it. And we took a lot of flack for that, but we had to give the voters the opportunity. What it looks like now, if we put another override on, is that we're trying to slip it through after the first one failed, one. And two, we're going to be in the same exact position a year or two down the road when the school budget comes in at another 6 or 7%, and we're going to have to go back and ask for another override. Now, there's no good solution to this. I don't think that this solves all of the problems that have accumulated over the last 3 or 4 years. I'm hesitant to even want to support putting this forward.
So, if I could respond, a couple of comments? And I appreciate it, and I think your theory is correct, because we've seen it played out. And that's because of the school district agreement, which I think is horrible, right? So it allows the schools to do things that I don't believe it should in terms of its spending capability. It's overspending what I think the town's ability to pay are, right? But that's not a problem, an override problem, or even a budget problem. That's a problem of the school district agreement. And regardless if you have an override this year or not next year they can put a huge increase in no matter what, and you'll be looking at override. So an override question is depending upon us somehow getting that school budget under control. If we vote the override this year or not override, we could be voting for an override next year and the year after and year after. We're not
But
fixing that
we're
problem.
kidding ourselves to think that that's ever going to fix itself as a situation. And I want to make it very clear, too, in my stance on this, because I work in education as a field, I don't think, to a certain extent, what the schools are asking for is out of maliciousness. I do think there are additional needs that the kids have. There's social emotional learning issues. There's issues, particularly this year, that the schools are dealing with that 20 years ago weren't even considered part of education. So there's an enormous responsibility placed on educators and on administrators.
Mhm.
And there's this view in town that it's the schools versus the police and fire. I don't think anybody in any of those camps agree that that's the case. This is it's a budgeting issue that is impacting almost every town our size outside of the 495 belt in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But I don't want to be in a position either where we're putting overrides on the table every year and we just look like we can't run the government. I'm sorry, but I can't. The last 4 or 5 years, if you're spending all of our money that we could have been using on capital infrastructure on just keeping our budget afloat, but we're still adding new positions, we're still adding new capacity, we're still purchasing things, that's a huge problem. And that's a problem that we caused. The schools didn't cause that.
I'd say this, Mr. Chairman, is that if we take let's say we take the $200,000 of real cuts and we use $100,000 for free cash this year, right? What happens next year when they come out with a crazy number again? We're gonna cut the town side another 200 grand, another 200 grand? At some point, you gotta have some level of services for the town. And you're absolutely, the same side of what you're arguing is could happen to the town. Every year we keep cutting to give to the kids. And pretty soon you're not gonna have a proper police force, a proper fire department, a proper DPW. Our DPW right now is so understaffed, it's ridiculous. I think most of us would agree DPW is short-staffed right now. And we're cutting money from their budget this year, right? At some point, we're sitting us on the town side of government on a little bit of a death spiral, and I don't know the answer to that either.
Yeah, I get it, but we had the highest unemployment rate at one point during this in the entire country. And I feel like we're in like a cartoon and we're taking the kid at the playground and shaking him upside down to get his lunch money out of his pocket. That's what an override is you're just charging more in taxes. You're not seeing an increase in services. You're still going to see a decrease eventually because if the school budgets keep coming in higher and we don't keep using overrides. I just don't know what the answer is, but I can't. If we're not cutting staff or personnel with this $200,000, if we can find those cuts either anywhere, as painful as that might be, I'm really hesitant to support raising folks' taxes if we do not, if they don't result in cutting of personnel. If the personnel's been saved and we have the staff that was saved through the reduction on the school side, I really don't like it. You know, because we just put forward one last week. And the people might not even know. We don't have enough time to get as much information out to where people are going to be able to say, oh, there was another override on? I thought we failed that 3 weeks ago. It's a tough situation. But those are my 2 cents.
Nothing easy about this at all, I agree.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Leah.
I thought we only had about $100,000 in free cash available right now anyway, so if we were to put the $100,000 towards balancing the budget, then we're essentially, if I understand correctly, wiping free cash completely to zero.
Right.
And then we have whatever we may or may not get in the fall for certified free cash. So
Right.
I just wanted to, normally we're used to carrying forward a little bit of free cash for emergencies or capital projects or whatever, and this would kind of totally wipe that out. And if I understand correctly, the snow and ice budget is still quite underutilized or underfunded. So my concern is, if we make the $200,000 in cuts, and that kind of means that we've underfunded snow and ice, we have put very little in the reserve fund, or for reserve fund transfers or anything like that, and we don't have any free cash moving forward, we don't know what free cash is gonna look like in the fall, are we potentially setting ourselves up again next year to have to make very significant cuts, even if the school budget comes in at 2.5%. And I think that this is kind of where we've been historically, is we've made the cuts to town side, the town has continued to grow. As the town continues to grow, we need to kind of grow our departments, professionalize a little bit here and there, and make those investments. And we've kind of hit that breaking point, right, I feel, where we need to be very thoughtful about what those cuts are actually going to look like and do to town, not just for this year, but also next year and going forward. I mean, we've been through these kind of drastic cuts 10, 15 years ago, and we're finally almost getting caught back up to kind of where we should be to have safe staffing levels and everything, and now we're going to cut everything again. It scares me a little bit.
Of course, it's terrifying. But your only solution to that is raising taxes.
I know, I'm not,
Right.
I mean,
And
I just think
like
that
with
we
the
need to
free
have-
cash thing, like you mentioned too, I would be opposed to using free cash to balance the budget, because we've gotten to the point where we've used so much free cash to balance our budgets over the last several years. Our capital infrastructure is atrocious, and that's where that money should be going. It should be going into our buildings, into our sidewalks, into ADA improvements. We had to get a grant from the state to get an ADA accessible walkway at our senior center.
Well, we had free cash funding set aside for that, and then the ADA, that was voted at town meeting.
Right, but you should see the backlog of items that have been approved by CIPC. You have items that have been approved years ago
I'm aware,
that
yeah.
are unfunded, and they won't be funded. It's just, it's a situation where I just think
And I
it's
guess-
not to just dump it on the school. Yes, it is because the school budget keeps coming in higher, but we've made really poor decisions over the last few years, and if we want to take responsibility, I think we have to make better, sound financial decisions moving forward.
And I guess I just, I hear that, and I guess I also am concerned about any cuts that we make now to get,
Mhm.
if we're talking about now cutting 300,000, because we're not gonna use 100,000 of free cash. If we make those $300,000 cuts, does that improve, how does that impact like just routine maintenance to our buildings? Because that's part of the issues that we haven't been able to afford to do. We haven't been able to afford the routine upkeep of the buildings that we really should invest in, because, to get to your point with the free cash and everything. So I worry a little bit that we're setting ourselves up to kind of continue this downward spiral no matter what. And I don't have an answer. I mean, we have potential projects coming in on, to bring additional tax revenues in. Nothing's finalized yet. So, where are we as far as, is there any debt under the levy that can be coming off that we would see? Is there any, where are we in terms of that? Are there debt exclusions that are coming off that would ease some of that tax burden that folks are feeling? I don't have those answers in front of me.
Does anybody else on the board have any questions, comments? Well, we're going to have to make a decision because we have.
Through
to
the,
make
through
a
the chair,
decision.
do you mind if I just make a quick comment on snow and ice?
Yes, sir, Mr. Buckley, go ahead.
Thank you. The proposed budget with the cuts, we were able to restore some of the snow and ice, but we have cut back on staffing hours to do general highway significantly. I would caution anyone with the concept of deficit spending on snow and ice, because if you over deficit spend it, you're only going to have to pay it back. So I just want to make sure everybody has a good fundamental understanding of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, one little point here.
Mhm.
The reason I said that we should stay at the 300,000 is because if we stayed at the 300,000, we could use the $20,000 of free cash we have to pay for capital items that you're talking about.
Of course,
That's the logic behind it.
but I mean,
I
raising
noticed.
taxes is just, this is a long-term problem, and it's robbing Peter to pay Paul at this point. I mean, we can leave it to the voters. I just am a little bit unhappy with the proposition of having to do that after all the work that we put in to educate the public and try to come to a consensus. It's been a really tough process, but
You know, I'll submit, I'm gonna make my last comment. I agree 100% with you that this is a school problem in terms of them spending higher amounts than we can actually afford. And yet, you know, the sad part about that is that I can't figure a way, and I think you've looked at it and other people, to change the school agreement in some way that would take away that problem. So even though it's being caused by the overspending of the school district, it's the town side taking a brutal hit by it. And the real problem is that increase in spending beyond our ability to pay for it at the school side. So,
Yeah.
you know, I wish we could find the answer to that problem, because that's what, in order to stop future overrides, that's the problem we have to somehow address. And
I
it's
mean,
just
it
not
isn't. It's
easy.
also, again, I want to reiterate too, I don't think it's malicious for the
No,
most part on
no,
behalf of the school.
no.
Just education costs have gone through the roof everywhere, every community. So it's a tough predicament.
The cost of everything has gone through the roof, and
Well, 2x4 is $9 right now.
well,
So
and federal and state
Yeah.
aid are going down also, so
Yep.
it's all falling to local governments to fund it all, and it's, we're being squeezed on all sides. So I don't think anyone is in favor of, raising taxes, and I'm looking at it from a perspective as like the health of the town and trying to figure out where that can be sustainably. And I worry that if we don't have a very honest conversation, that we're setting ourselves up for continued problems down the road, to your point, as far as the kind of death spiral.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're coming at it from a lot of different perspectives, but I think we all have the same feeling.
I'll just make one other comment. I mean, when I was on the finance committee for 12 years, all we ever did was make the departments come in at level services. They've never been given any growth for many, many years. The school comes in and they just say what they want. And if all the other towns voted in, then we pay for it. That's not fair. It keeps pulling from the other departments. The reason I said it should be tied to the school budget is because that's the root of the problem. I don't support an override. I won't vote for an override. But that's also going to defeat the school budget, and they'll have to go back to the table and come in with a little more reasonable number, hopefully, if one other town votes it down. Other towns cannot afford it. And as far as infrastructure, drive around to the other communities in the school district and look at some of their infrastructure. It's being neglected just as much.
Of course.
Yeah, and it's all being drawn, the school budget is drawing on all these communities.
No, there's no good answers. But again, Carol, go ahead.
I just wanna, I really sat here and listened, and at first I would have probably said, let's do it one more year, but we keep throwing kicking the can down the road, right? I think we need to stop. It's exactly what we said. If it was in our homes, unless we could go out and get another job to pay for increased spending, then we just can't. It's gonna be the same thing next year. I think if we decide not to do an override, figure out where the problem is, and see if we can, and if there's absolutely no way to do that, then next year we revisit it,
Yeah.
but with a clear plan.
And that's exactly, I think, you put it succinctly. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say is I'm not in favor of one-time revenue for this year because that kicks the can down the road. But we're either going to have to support an override, which is raising people's taxes, or we're gonna have to find a way to make cuts. Every other option we have on the table is gonna be kicking that can down the road, and it's gonna be tying up our free cash and stuff the way we've been tying it up for the last few years, which it shouldn't be done that way. But I agree with you 100%. So what do we wanna do? I mean, do we wanna make a decision to put this on now? Do we wanna have a special meeting next week where we're gonna have this a little bit more fleshed out? Because to Peter's point, it's a tough decision, it's not a popular decision, but it's a decision that we have to make, and it's either gotta be done now or within 7 days.
We just make it now. Because you know what we gotta say. We gotta say we need the override. Put the override out there for the people.
But do we want to hear FinCom's opinion? Are they
I was
meeting
just
again?
gonna say.
I mean,
Well, FinCom, I think Karen's in the meeting, they still have to meet, and they're still working on the revised budget. So
Right.
I'm not sure if we're gonna have enough time.
well,
They're
did they
done.
leave it with an
They're
override
done?
or not?
Karen, are you on the call?
Yep, I'm here.
Would you like to weigh in on where FinCom's at and any opinion you might have on what we're talking about?
Ron should have told you we came up with our budget last week. We have a balanced budget. So we are finished with what we need to do.
Is that balanced budget with an override?
It's a balance with the override, right, Karen?
That is not a balance with an override because there is no override.
Okay.
The budget still reflects, Karen, please correct me if I'm wrong, the budget reflects right now the $200,000 additional cuts and using approximately $100,000 of free cash to balance the budget. That's my understanding of where it's at right now. Now, if you put in the override would be those cuts. If the override passes, the cuts would not be made and the free cash would not be used, so the cuts would be restored to back to like current levels, and we wouldn't use free cash to balance the budget. We could use that money for capital items.
Is there any clarity on?
There is one problem with that statement, Ron.
Yeah, go ahead.
You had them do level funding, not level service. So no, there will be cuts to the town regardless, because level funding means that there is no you're already making cuts.
You're correct, Karen. It's level funded, but it's a reduction in services still, because even at level funded, you're going backwards.
Exactly.
She's right. Still a cut. Even if you get the 200 back, it's still a cut.
Okay. Does FinCom have a position on the override? Have you discussed it with your board, Karen?
Leah asked the question. She can tell you what she was told. That would be a better way to handle it.
I asked the question, and FinCom said that it's really a select board decision, but that they are, Karen, correct me if I'm misspeaking, that they have similar concerns to what I had expressed, that if it's not this year, it's next year, that we're on this death spiral, and it's not sustainable without doing some sort of something to get additional revenue to get us back to where we should be. And they had similar concerns with using the free cash and leaving free cash to zero, and kind of deficit spending with snow and ice and the reserve account being quite low and everything. So they didn't take a specific position, but there was definitely conversation. Again, nobody wants an override, nobody wants to increase taxes, but we need to do something. It's not sustainable. And they brought up again and again that there were that level funding is decreased, and years of level funding have resulted in years of decreased services as town has continued to grow. So that's kind of.
Well, I mean, yes and no though, because like you keep saying death spiral and as town continues to grow. I mean, the idea of taxes is that as town continues to grow, we're still collecting new taxes from people that move in.
And we're also sending more children to school because town.
Our enrollment's at it's been declining for 10 years. 10 years. We're at a 10-year low in enrollment.
But because of the regional district, you have to look at our numbers compared to how the other 4 towns' populations are also. It's not just a simple, I mean, yes, it's a simple numbers game, but it's not, there's a lot more moving pieces, and you know this. I mean, it's not,
Yeah, but I'm tired of the narrative that we have more kids in the school system, when in reality, I mean, that was used for the anti-growth thing, was used for everything. We are not sending more kids to school. We're sending less kids to school. Over the last 20, we've never been at a lower level in the last 2 decades in
what's
terms
our
of the number
ratio
of kids.
compared to the other towns, though?
Oh, I have to take a look at it, but I mean, it's not like the problem is all these new kids are going to school eating up that tax money. That's just not the case.
But I'm saying with the way the regional agreement is written, it's not simply a numbers game, it's also a numbers and ratio of children compared to other towns' number of children. So even though we are sending 100 fewer children to school, we may actually be sending the second most children to school out of the 5 towns. So
Well, we are, yeah.
so therefore our numbers are still in proportion to
Yeah, but
that ratio.
yeah, I mean, no, we have been. We have been the second largest town in the district for a long time. But I'm just saying, if you look at the actual number per pupil spent, you know, that number being what the state median is, we again have less students. So like, you know, we put a presentation up a couple of years ago, the growth bylaw thing. It's just factually not correct. I mean, it's not like kids are coming in. We have less kids in Central Mass than we've ever had, and Rutland is a part of that too. So it's just the cost of education. It's not necessarily tied to the students. So again, when people move in, we're still collecting tax money from them. It's not, when you say death spiral, and I heard Lyndon talk about, well, government hasn't been allowed to grow. You know, well, I don't want government to grow.
Services.
Like, okay, services. All right, I just, it's tough.
And the growth that we have been getting as we grow is going to the school. That's where it's going.
All right, so I mean, the board can make a decision on whether they want to move forward with an override, I guess, because we have to make the decision. So I'll leave it to the board. I'll entertain a motion to raise taxes. Anybody? I'm going to auction it off. Going once?
Now, wait a minute.
You're assuming the override's gonna pass.
Oh no, it's going to fail.
I know, so
But
you're
I mean,
raising
if,
taxes.
you know, we know it's going to fail, then we have to work to solve this problem. It's
But we gotta go through this procedure. We gotta have this to Anita, so she can get this all posted and worked out, right?
yeah. I mean, it's
So
either got to be between now and
I'll
submission.
make the motion then that we put on a new ballot, a $300,000 override. Just to, and word it so that it goes directly at the schools and not to the town,
It's not
Per
second.
to the
Lyndon's
town
suggestion.
services.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board?
So just a clarification, I want to make sure I'm absolutely clear.
Mhm.
So the only change to the motion that was put on the ballot is it would say the Washington School District and Bay Path, that would not include Middleside, that's correct? Okay.
And this
Just
would-
want to make sure I understand.
This would eliminate our use of free cash to balance the budget.
Not if you use 300.
No.
So how much you need then?
300, if you do 300, oh yeah, it would eliminate our need to use free cash. You're correct.
Okay, are you sure
No,
now?
you're right,
Before
yep, yep,
before
no,
I
you're
go any further
Right,
with
if
this?
you,
On this-
no, you're right. It's, if you use 300, you won't use free cash to balance the budget. It would free up the free cash to be able to use for capital items. Correct.
Okay. I'll leave it like I said.
That's correct.
Okay.
Assuming that it passes.
Assuming it passes.
It
yeah.
assumes, yeah, assume.
We had a good conversation tonight. I think we're all on the same page in terms of our intent when it comes to helping the town. I want to make it clear, though, that when we're voting to present the option to the voters,
Mhm.
not because we support or do not support conceptually raising taxes.
Well, I
Yeah,
agree
we
with you.
stated that in the last override.
We did, but I just want to make it clear. All right.
And we need to also, can I just make it abundantly clear that if the school budget passes and the override fails, is that a failure of the school budget then?
It's my understanding that if another town votes it, no, then the override would supersede the vote at the town meeting. So structuring it that way would fail the school budget by de facto, I guess.
Our
That's what-
approval is contingent on the override, that's why it's in the amendment.
Correct.
Correct, but if another town fails the school budget, also,
And then the override fails and the budget does not pass.
okay,
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, the same is true if 2 town meetings voted down too.
Correct.
That's
Right.
still true, the same way, right?
I mean, even if we vote it down with the override, that's still voting it
Yeah.
down, and another town votes it down.
right. I just wanted to, for that clarification, as far as if the school budget passes, then and the override fails, then there's still that $200 to $300,000 cut.
We'll be right back where we are now. Anyway.
Right, right. And so my question, I guess, was what it would take to get the school budget to fail or not fail, like.
A lot of angry people.
Mr. Chair, may I speak for just a moment?
Yes.
The way that it is structured, everything that's been said here is exactly correct. The problem is that you require another town meeting
To set a new budget.
if 4 towns accept the Wachusett budget, because we will not have a balanced budget at that moment.
Karen, in the past, didn't we always have an alternative budget if we?
You're separating them now. If you had both, if you had the override on the town, you could do it in a single motion, because they control the same financial elements. You can't, I don't believe, maybe town council should weigh in here, but if we pass a budget that assumes that $300,000 is available to the town for its municipal services, and then Wachusett passes without our override, then we are on the hook for coming up with a budget that loses that $300,000.
But
And that can only be done at a town meeting.
we've had this happen in the past. Karen, didn't we have? How did we handle it in the past? Didn't we have another budget prepared?
We have several budgets. I believe we
Right.
have, well, we have 2 right now. So yeah, we'd have the budget to go back to. We have all the numbers.
Because what if we fail? What if we fail the school budget on the floor anyway? Then it changes the whole budget right there.
Yep.
And we have to go to another whole town meeting to do the school budget.
Because of the override.
When all is said and done, the town has to approve the appropriation for the municipal budget.
Mhm.
And if the budget that's presented assumes the $300,000 is in the budget and available for municipal services, in order to cut that $300,000, you need town meeting. I'm not trying to sway
Yeah,
anybody's
the
vote.
attorney,
I'm
yeah,
just
I
giving you
We've done these
information.
overrides before. I just don't. I'm trying to think. I know we had prepared several budgets for the floor. Maybe we get clarification from council so that we know.
Yeah, I think we'd have to do that. Just one other comment to this, if you vote. In terms of the date of the election, the ballot, I don't know if the board needs to say the date, or if we could just leave it up to Anita, the 28th, or the best date that goes
The
from the
select
town
board has
clerk.
to select the date of the election.
So we should set the 28th tonight then, too?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that that's correct, so we don't forget that. Do you think the 28th, or you're comfortable the 28th is the date and it'll be work out? Okay.
Yes.
Just wanna make sure, so let's set that as a date as well.
So I don't know what the process is to call a special election. I know you talked about a
have
ballot
to-
article.
You have to post it and do all the same posting as you did with any other election, so it's the same warrant.
What I'm not sure is the process that the select board has to follow to call a special election, which is what this is, and to place the single ballot article on its warrant. Anita's not available tonight.
I was gonna call her, I was gonna say, I'm not absolutely sure, I think if you just vote the 28th, you're gonna have a special election, I think that's okay, but I'm not 100% sure without either Anita or the legal counsel weighing in, but.
And can we go forward with that? And if we have to, we'll
We can change
meet
it
in
if
a
we
week
have to.
and we'll make whatever motion.
That's
needs
what
to
I
be
would say,
done.
we can call a
details.
special meeting if we have to do something, but I think
We
it's
can
okay.
conceptually support something tonight, and then we'll have to
Yep.
regroup with Anita to get everything sorted out.
Yeah.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from any of the board members? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Benoit,
Aye.
Whitman,
Waitman, aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Nichols,
Nichols on.
or City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Further discussion? Hearing none, I'll have a roll call vote. Benoit,
Benoit, aye?
Whitman,
Whitman, I.
Clark,
Aye.
Nichols,
Nichols eye?
City, aye. Everyone have a good night.